Rockville. Today is December 16th and we'll begin meeting 29-24. Please join me as you're able in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Sarah Taylor Farrell, can you please share if we have any changes to the agenda?
Madam Mayor and council members, there are no changes to the agenda. There has been several revisions over the week. We've added a couple consent items and the resolution under action. And then we've updated with the Town Center Master Plan on Friday. But that is all reflected online.
Thank you. And just a note for the public, the most recent changes were the Town Center Plan and Resolution were on Friday evening, correct?
Correct.
For those big items. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Welcome, Jeff Mihalik, City Manager's Report.
Mayor Ashton, members of City Council, good evening. Just a real quick update. I should have mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Boy Scout Troop 1094 volunteered their time to help clean up the King Farm Stream Valley areas in just 7 hours of work. They collect over 50 bags of trash, which is pretty remarkable. They really made a significant and positive impact on the community and the environment. I just want to salute the Scouts for doing that work for us. Other thing, in this one, I'm asking for help. The Housing and Community Development Department is collecting books and toys for the annual December holiday drive, which actually wraps up this weekend. The greatest need is for books for tweens and teens. Donations of gently read books or new copies suitable for ages 13 through 17, again, ages 13 through 17, are much needed and much appreciated. And toys are also needed for ages 0 to 11. Again, toys 0 to 11. The city is really trying to serve over 600 families with more than 1,500 children this year, and having those toys and books donated would be really greatly appreciated. There's donation boxes at city buildings, and people really would appreciate if you drop those off. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you and your team for a fantastic employee appreciation. We have some employees who have been here over 45, 50 years. So whether it's 5 years or 50 years, I think it's so important to honor those who sacrifice for all of us as residents and our community, and we really appreciate them. And thank you to HR and your entire team on behalf of all of us for the fantastic celebration.
Great. Thank you, Mayor.
The other thing I wanted to note is the Rockville Civic Ballet celebrated their 50th anniversary. I know some of us have been following them on social media, but I just wanted to note they did their last performance at the current F. Scott Fitzgerald Theater. And just for folks who are curious, that theater, it closed as of today, correct? For much needed renovations to make it more inclusive and supportive of people with disabilities. So just wanted to at least let people know if they're planning to go to F. Scott Fitzgerald, the box office is going to move to Glenview Mansion, right? Okay, excellent, thank you. All right. Okay, we'll now move on to boards and commissions appointments and reappointments. We have the Cultural Arts Commission, the Human Services Advisory Commission, and the Planning Commission. Who would like to get started? Dr. Miles?
Sorry. So, thank you, Madam Mayor, for the, you want me to do cultural arts?
Yes, please.
Okay. I move that we nominate Karen Gallant Askin to a reappointment to serve a 3-year term until February 1st, 2027, and also move the renomination or reappointment of Brian Rogers to serve a 3-year term until July 1st, 2027.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councilmember Fulton seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Human Services Advisory Commission, Councilmember Valeri.
I move to approve the new appointment of Nirmal Ravi to the Human Services Advisory Commission to serve a full 3-year term until December 1st, 2027.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Jackson, seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. And now we have the Planning Commission. Councilmember Fulton.
I move to approve the reappointment of Susan Pittman to the Planning Commission to serve a full 3-year term until December 1st, 2027.
Thank you. It's been made and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say, Councilmember, yeah, okay, thank you. It's unanimous. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move to consent agenda. We have a few items. One is the award and contract for the Mid-Atlantic Waste Systems for the purchase of 3 rear loader, sorry, did I miss anything? Sorry, 1 second. Let's pause for community forum. If you would like to speak, I'm looking at the list and there's no one signed up in advance, but I believe there's some people who may want to speak from the floor. If you're interested in community forum, we welcome you to join. Please speak in a civil and courteous manner. I have the list here. It doesn't have anyone signed up. We have a list. It just has written comments on it. Yes, thank you. Please speak in a civil and courteous manner. You will have 3 minutes, and you'll see a time clock. Please state your name and whether you're a resident of Rockville. Welcome, Ms. Robin Prather.
Hello, Ms. Mayor and Council. My name is Robin Prather, and I am a resident of the city of Rockville. And I am also a member of Jerusalem Mount Pleasant United Methodist Church, which is the city of Rockville. So I'm going to come today just on the church. Normally I'm here on Lincoln Park, but today I'm here on the church because I found out recently that the buildings across the street, I think their address may be Middle Lane, are in negotiation to be upgraded so that their heights can be towering over our church. And I do have a concern about that because not only our church is there, but there's a cul-de-sac of people's houses there already. So I was told that there's a different way it could be done where it's kind of a slope, what is it called? Layback slope or something like that that could be used instead of just a magnitude of upgrade. And so I want the board to consider that for that property versus just letting them build up. I mean, as you know, our church is very historical. We've been there a long time. We want to be there a lot longer. And we do want to feel like we're a part of the community and not just something that's tucked in the corner and not a part of the community. And I would like to say thank you for doing the Hebron art acknowledgement in you all's project. So thank you. That's all I had to say today.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Welcome.
My name is Larry Jackson. I am not a resident of Rockville, but like Robin, I go to Jerusalem Mount Pleasant United Methodist Church, so I'm here speaking on behalf of the church. So the question I want to have, I have, following up on Robin's comments, was this. We recently received a notice of a complex being built north of us. I can't remember the name of that, but it's a little north of us around the town center and all. We received notices on that. If there are plans going up that Robin referred to, we've received nothing about those plans. So my question is, if there are plans for that area across from the church, should we receive some notice about that and the ability to comment on that? Has something like that been issued? Or?
Thank you. I'm just going to ask the city manager if, would be Mr. Gottesman today, who's on top to be able to respond to questions? Okay, so Mr. Gottesman will meet you. I understand that there's a question of whether they received notices about the Rockville Town Center master plan, as well as any other developments. Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure that's wrong master plan. Well, I'm aware of the master plan, And I'm aware that we have received some notices of another development going up close to us, but not as close as the one Robin referred to. We have not received anything about those plans, and I'm wondering, has anything been issued? Or is that just speculation at this point? There are actually no plans for that point. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will just note for the listening public, there is a Rockville Town Center Master Plan, which we're going to talk about this evening, that has various zoning potential changes in compliance with the comprehensive master plan, as well as through the Planning Commission's recommendations. But Mr. Gottesman, if you could just be available, if we can meet you at the back room to be able to answer any questions. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Mr. Gottesman can meet with you now if you'd like. Yes, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? All right. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to consent agenda item 9. We have A through G this evening. A is the award and a contract for the Mid-Atlantic Waste Systems for the purchase of 3 rear loader refuse collection trucks to support sanitation. We also have an authorization to approve 2 easements and 1 license associated with public improvements at Storm Drain on Lot 6, Block D. Another authorization to extinguish an easement for a 10-foot wide path for pedestrian use established between lots 9 and 10 on Hardwick Place. The authorization for the city manager to execute a host agreement lease with Francis Energy to install electric vehicle charging stations on city property. E, the ability to sign license agreements for the construction of a sidewalk on Virginia Avenue between Woodland Road and England Terrace, as well as F, the construction of the F. Scott Fitzgerald Theater ADA, American Disability Act improvements, capital improvements program, to Bob Andrews Construction. And lastly, G, authorization for the city manager to execute the Molly Price dwelling unit. One more. For the city manager to execute the restrictive covenants for flats at North Side. And lastly, this is another one, F, which is just the approval of minutes. So I will ask my colleagues, do you want to approve A through H, or do you have any to pull? Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just waiting. I didn't want to jump the gun, but I was going to move consent agenda items A through H as read.
Do we have a second? All right, Councilmember Shaw seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Wonderful, thank you. There's a lot of good things in here in terms of new MPDU home ownership opportunities coming up. Just want to flag that the city does have a list that you can sign up to be able to be on for those homes. And also appreciate all of the other work that's being done on city property and the expansion of the EV charging vehicles. Okay. We now have agenda item 11A, action item A, resolution to approve a consent plan from the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, WMATA, for the Rockville Metro Station. Welcome, Manisha Tiwari. And I believe you have city staff, Ricky Barker, Jenny Snap, and Jim as panelists, should there be any additional questions. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you may remember, at your meeting in May this year, you received a presentation on the Concept 1 plan for the Rockville Metro Station design as proposed by WMATA and its consultant team that you unanimously approved. To ensure the successful implementation of the concept design, the city is incorporating the Concept 1 vision into the Town Center Master Plan, as you discussed at your meeting last Monday. To advance the project, the city will need to actively partner with WMATA. Staff from WMATA has conveyed to us that the inclusion of the concept plan into the city's policy document provides a greater level of clarity to WMATA with the city's intent and vision, and approval of the concept plan with the resolution will be helpful for WMATA's strategic planning purposes Staff has made some modifications to the resolution based on your feedback, such as referencing community engagement, improving wayfinding, facilitating the construction of new housing, and to request WMATA to move forward with the necessary processes for joint development of the properties. Another modification was made to include the map of concept one as an attachment to the resolution. A printed copy of the revised resolution was provided to you earlier at the meeting today. Staff recommends that the mayor and council act on the resolution to approve the concept one plan for the Rockville Metro Station. Do you have any questions of staff?
Colleagues? Okay. I want to thank you for making some of the changes that I know that I and my colleagues had. The only thing I'll just note is we do call out pedestrian safety and wayfinding. And I also appreciate that you added in housing. So it at least covers the three key things that we're trying to accomplish with the concept plan. I just wanted to ask a question about whether we could reach out to the groups that I had mentioned in my email. There were some groups that I'm not sure that have heard more about what we're planning. I know Mr. Mihalik has that list, so I wanted to flag that. And then the second is many of my colleagues are interested in having a future discussion about the housing aspect of it for Rockville as well as Twin Brook. Thank you. Do you have a comment?
So yeah, we will reach out to the Lincoln Park Community Center, a community group, as you had recommended. When we sent out notifications about this plan, we were ready, we volunteered to go to any community group or board of commissions that would be interested in knowing more about this plan, but we didn't hear a lot of interest. We did have two public meetings, which had quite a large attendance, in which there were quite a few questions which we addressed. But yeah, we're happy to go back to any community group that may be interested in hearing more about this.
That's fantastic. And then since we'll be moving this forward, it'll just be great to have an update to the transportation mobility, RPAC, and RBAC so that they're aware of what we passed. Is that okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
will do. Thank you.
Councilmember Van Grack.
I again also want to thank staff for kind of putting it together and the changes. But I also wanted to ask, and I don't know if this is more for staff or the city manager, is there anything else that we can do? Because we've been pretty unanimous and solid with regard to this being a very important and valuable step to the city and the town center. Is there anything more that the mayor and council can do, or that even the listening public can do to further this process along with WMATA?
Yep. I think really the key is for us to sit down now, again, with WMATA and just say, we did everything we've been asked to do. The council has expressed their clear intent to get this property developed as soon as practical. We know what the next steps are, but are there any ways for us to expedite that process, really to get us further up in the queue? And if we hear anything from WMATA that requires policy action, we'll bring it back. But it's full steam ahead as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. So we'll have a follow-up discussion about the housing aspect. I also know you're working very hard on the bridge signage and advancing that both on the CSX side as well as the pedestrian bridge. So we'll look forward to updates. I know the community is pretty excited about that. And then just as a recollection of the May meeting that we all had together, WMATA said that they needed to be able to have something, a report from us, which I know staff is going to work on getting the resolution plus the report, and they will get things approved with their board. Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. We really appreciate all the work on this. All right, so we'll now begin agenda item 12A. Oh, sorry. Everyone wants to vote. All right, Councilman Fulton.
I move to adopt the resolution to approve Concept 1 plan from the Washington Metropolitan Transit Authority study for the Rockville Metro Station.
Councilmember Valeri.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. All right. Okie dokie. Thanks, colleagues. All right, so for agenda item 12A, this is our second work session on the Rockville Town Center Master Plan. I'm going to welcome Katie Gerbis, as well as panelists Ricky Barker, Jenny Snap, Andrew Reidelbach, and Jim Wasilek. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Ashton and members of the City Council. My name is Andrew Rattlebach, and I'm a principal planner with the Community Planning and Development Services Department here with the City of Rockville. This evening, we are going to move into the second part of our work session for the Town Center Master Plan. A brief outline of what we will be discussing this evening. At the first meeting, the first work session that we had last week, there were 4 main items that you all were interested in having further discussion on: housing unit goals, building heights, both base heights and bonus height qualifiers, and parking. This evening, we're really planning to focus on the first 3 items, and then parking we are planning to bring back before you for further discussion at our next meeting on January the 6th. So first off, for the housing unit goal, and I guess I also want to mention that we plan to do this each in chunks. So instead of going through everything overall at first, like we kind of did last week, we will take each item separately to allow for discussion, questions, that sort of thing. So there was some discussion about how staff came up with the 2,000 unit housing goal that was in the initial draft of the master plan. And that goal came from counting up the various development projects that are in some sort of current review or application, and adding those up, and then taking about 600 units from the metro station proposed redevelopment, and then adding another 400 or so units from various other properties around town center on parking lots or other properties that may be open for redevelopment. And that is how staff got to the number of 2,000 units. In the almost 12 months since that January estimate happened, there have been some changes in the proposed development projects that are in some sort of review. And so the new numbers for the new unit counts are on the right side of your screen. Adding those up together, we got to about 1,900 units, just shy of 1,900. And then again, adding in several other units just as an estimate from the undeveloped parcels or potentially redeveloped parcels in town center, we came up with a goal of somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000.
Can I ask just one clarifying question for listening
Yes.
public? Because I know when I first read this, I said, because we're at the end of the year and January is so close, that January speaks to January 2024.
Correct.
And that December speaks to December 2024, not
Correct.
January 2025. So I
Correct.
just want to clarify. Thank you.
So our question for this evening, and that we had last week, is 2,000 units the appropriate housing unit goal for the plan, or should it be higher? And based on the discussion last week, it did seem like that the majority of you were interested in seeing a potential housing unit goal of higher than 2,000. So staff, in looking at these new numbers and considering everything, staff does believe that a goal between 2,500 and 3,000 is a strong aspirational target for the town center master plan area.
Thank you. Just clarifying question. This did not or did include the town center apartments on 90 Monroe. I know that was one of the things you were also flagging.
It does not.
So that includes, so that could be added to new.
Correct.
Okay.
So at this time, we'd like to have this body entertain our 2,000 unit goal, provide some direction to staff on where you would like to see that land in the approved plan.
Thank you. And just since I mentioned town center apartments, that is currently, it's vacant right now. And it's currently at about 100 very small units. I don't know what you think would be possible in that line, but I just wanted to give my colleagues at least the quantity there. And I appreciate that under each you put staff's recommendation. That is very helpful. Well, I do support going up from 2,000 because we've included 2,000, well, just under 2,000, and you haven't even touched North Washington or Town Center apartments. So given that, you know, some of the units are 100 to 200 on average, sometimes 3, I think this looks great. Maybe we can get more in the future, but I think this is a good start. Want to see what my colleagues have to say. Councilman Van Grack.
I agree. I think, as the mayor said, this is a good start. I'm kind of going to go back to what Councilmember Fulton said at the last meeting. If we're truly talking about aspirational here, I mean, we're talking about realistically talking about 2,000 in the not too distant future. As the mayor said, we've got other properties that are really lined up. If we're talking about a master plan that we want to be seeing in 10 to 20 years, I think we could even be looking above 3,000 because we're talking aspirational here as opposed to what we know is coming online. So I think at a minimum, if we're talking about an aspirational target, I think a minimum is closer to 3,000. And I think we easily could be looking, if we're targeting the way this body's been talking about, even more than that.
Thank you. And question for you, are these going to be changing any council of government targets or anything publicly, whereas if we don't meet our number is a concern?
I don't believe so, no. This was informed by our Council of Governments goal that we have of 8,600, but it's not directly tied to that.
Okay, all right, because I like to meet goals, so just want to make sure. All right, what do you all think? Councilmember Shaw?
I have a question. So I definitely want to support a goal around 3,000 and a very high goal. My question would be, are most of those units going to be single bedroom studio, or are we also looking at 2 to 3 bedroom? Because I know the majority of Rockville renters live in 2 to 3 bedrooms, and so just with the cost of living increasing, I just want to make sure there's places for folks to go if they need to move. So could you share a little bit about your thoughts on the unit size as we go up?
So right now, there's nothing in our code, either for market rate units or MPDUs, that specify what the unit mix has to be, how many are studios, 1s, 2s, 3s, et cetera. So to be candid, I'm not sure how through this plan we could dictate or force the market on what that split would be. We can certainly, as we're having discussions with developers, encourage that to happen and bring up that we know we have larger families that want to live in these areas. We know that a studio is not conducive to all of the types of families and households that we have here in Rockville. But right now, nothing in here requires or sets like a quota or a threshold, anything like that.
I would like to encourage the larger size units, family size units.
I believe there's some negotiation we can have, at least on the MPDUs.
And that's determined for each project as their agreement.
Right. So it wouldn't be on the plan, but we can actually put language or a sentence that says we want to encourage spaces where families can go. So I would support.
I believe there actually is some language in the housing chapter on that right now. This was a topic that came up before the Planning Commission. So in the narrative, we do, I don't remember the exact quote off the top of my head, but we do allude to the fact of we want to see the full spectrum of what the market can provide, knowing that for some folks, studios are totally appropriate. For others, a 3 or a 4 bedroom may be more appropriate. So there is some soft language within the housing chapter right now.
And maybe just because sometimes over time, people change, staff change, we change. Something that also notes what we intend to do with MPDUs as well, I think might be helpful, just so we're writing it down in history. I will say if you take more square footage for larger apartments, that does mean that the unit count might change. So there's that as well. Councilmember Fulton.
I think we covered it. I was going to suggest that we make sure we include language where we can. You said soft language, maybe somewhat less soft language would capture the intent of what I hear the body saying. We covered it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so it sounds like I don't see anyone jumping out of their seats, that people are liking what staff's recommendation is. Okay. Do you need since this is a workshop, you don't need a vote. You just need broad direction.
If it's not clear to me, I'll let you know. Thank you,
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you. I had one other comment that relates to this, and I signaled it in some of the questions that I sent to Mr. Mihalik, but we have housing goal numbers in general, and when we give to COG, we give them overall numbers. We know COG has also affordable and middle income housing targets. And so I don't see specific language necessarily around that. I know we speak to it softly in this, but I just wonder, as we have housing targets for that, I just wanted to flag that maybe as a city, that we put out some numbers on what our hope is on affordable housing targets in the future, especially since we're considering the bonus density program. Councilmember Valeri, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just saying that that would be extremely helpful because part of this goal and trying to determine where that fits into our overall city goal on affordable housing would be extremely helpful. And I guess going forward, as we consider any development proposal before us, that would be helpful to kind of know. So I guess going forward, if we're shifting this to 3,000, which I'm in full support of, then how does that change the calculus for the entire city, if at all?
Thank you. We're ready for your next question.
So I'm going to ask one more question. Do we want to give the range of 2,500 to 3,000, or do we want to establish 3,000?
I think we're
Three?
fine at 3.
We're going bold.
All right, thank you for that. Now we're going to move on and talk a bit about building height. We had a lot of discussion about this last week, so we're going to continue this discussion.
Can I ask a question about this?
Yeah.
My initial thinking is, do you all want to talk building height first, or do you want to talk about what you get for additional building height? That's the easier. No, you're okay with going with building heights first?
We have to do it.
Okay.
I feel like we have to do it together. Yeah.
No, there's a separate topic right after this on what you get for building heights. So do you want to, which one do you want to tackle first? Building heights, or do you want to tackle the bonus program? Councilmember Van Graff.
Looking at the hand signals of Councilmember Valeri, I think you can't look at them separately. I think they have to be looked at together because.
They will. Yeah, they
No,
will. It's just
no.
a matter of which one goes first.
But I don't think it's a matter of going first because I think you have to be able to push both together. You can't just talk about one without talking about the consequence of another.
Absolutely.
And if you're looking at just the base building height without contemplating what it might be with regard to a bonus height, you're potentially losing what the maximums could or couldn't be. And so I don't think we can talk about them separately. I'm comfortable with you presenting one first, but when we have our discussion points, I think they have to be after they present both issues so we can consider them together.
Yes, so the way they have this program, because I looked at the presentation and the agenda, right now it's building heights and then it's the bonus program.
And
So-
Then it's the qualifiers for the bonus.
Right, the
Correct.
qualifiers for the bonus program.
And I guess what I'm saying is I would ask my colleagues that instead of discussing each as a piecemeal, we see the staff's presentation on all of those parts and then have a broad discussion on building heights overall.
That's just where I was trying to go, actually. I wanted to be able to talk about the qualifiers because that might inform the height discussion, so. Councilman Van Graff, go ahead.
So we'll
So staff
run
okay
through it
to
all.
modify the way you're presenting
Yep,
this?
that's
Thank
not a
you.
problem.
Perfect.
All right, so the first slide that we have here, this is about existing maximum building heights allowed by the existing zoning. This was a question that came up last Monday of it's hard to talk about what do we want it to be without understanding what is it right now and where is the difference. So the map that you see here on the side, this is our existing zoning map. And then the chart that you see on your left side, that's kind of the legend that shows what each color relates to as far as what zone that is and the maximum height allowed under that zone. So you can see that our our tallest zones are the MXTD zones. They are in this bottom. Can you see my cursor? You can kind of. Let me switch it to a laser real quick. There we go. So in this area, this is our tallest heights right now at 120 feet. You can see as we move north into the planning area, we have our MXCD, which is around 75 feet of height. Along the edges, a lot of that is MXNC, which is 45 feet of height. One specific thing that I want to point out on this map, there was some discussion last week about the College Square townhouses over here and why we were proposing those to be in the edge. The height proposed in the edge is consistent with the height that that property is zoned right now. It would be 75 feet in both, so there wouldn't really be an impact there. It's continuing the existing zoning. We also have several planned developments. We refer to those as PDs within Town Center. There are 4 of them. So you can see on the thing that just popped up, the PDs are that bright violet color, the various heights that are allowed in those planned development zones. The tallest heights within those is the PD RCI zone, which allows up to 235 feet. However, it's worth noting that right now the tallest building within that zone is the Boulevard Ansel apartment building, which sits at around 170 feet. So like much in zoning, our zoning allows certain things to happen, but it doesn't guarantee that everything is going to exactly go up to whatever that maximum height is. So there's still some, discrepancy there between what has actually been built and what the height in that PD is.
Can you just repeat that? So Ansel is 125 feet?
170 feet.
170 feet?
Correct.
And it's allowed to be?
235.
Right now?
Correct.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes, Councilmember Fulton.
Sorry, on the previous map, the MXT 35 feet, there's like a few little parcels of that. Can you help me understand what that is and why that is?
Yes. So MXT is our mixed use transition zone. That's what the MXT stands for. It's intended to be that transition from more intense mixed use developments to largely residential zones and single family residential zones. So the little bit, let me bring my laser over here, that you can see a little bit here. Much of the land that's outside of the planning area but is in this corridor along Adams Street is also zoned MXTD or MXT. And then similarly down here, it's meant to be that transition zone.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Thanks. Appreciate it.
And then since you're on this map and you talked about MXT, that's 35 feet, then the Ivy League Lane area, why is that we have MXT at 35 and the RMD 25, which is Ivy League, is at 75?
So the RMD 25 is a residential only zone, but it's a residential medium density. So it's a zone that's designed for attached units such as townhouses. So most of the townhouse developments that we see here are that RMD 25 zone. So my guess is that zone is applied there because that's the character of the land use and the development that is there.
Thank you. Councilmember Van Grack.
But we also have the 1 Metro Square, which goes even higher, right?
Yes, so that's in one of our planned development zones.
But you notice but that's the largest building here, and that exceeds 200, correct?
Yes, so that was developed under a past zoning.
But that still is grandfathered into not
Correct.
having to be torn down.
Correct.
So that still is our highest existing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to
Good
clarify.
clarification. That's the
Okay.
highest building
Correct.
right now.
Correct.
But when we're looking at the zones as they exist in this day, 235.
But
is
it's grandfathered into
100%.
it and still is our tallest building
Yep.
in existence. Good.
Yep.
All right.
Anytime a property is rezoned, we're not forcing any changes to happen to whatever is existing there.
But also, if the property were to redevelop, they still have the PD opportunity to go up to the maximum. So I know we
Correct.
covered this last week, but I wanted to just repeat it.
Yes, yes. So that's something that's going to be kind of determined a little bit through the zoning ordinance of how do we treat planned developments that already have their entitlements, that have already been approved for something different from the base zoning, and what happens if someone wants to come and redevelopment. A lot of our planned development zones were created when like a master plan development was happening, and oftentimes that was maybe the first time that land was redeveloping or the first time in a very long time. But now we're coming to the point where some of these PDs that were approved 40, 50 years ago are coming up on the end of their useful life and potentially being redeveloped. So we're working through what that process looks like.
Thank you.
All right, so moving into the edge, we had a lot of discussion last week about what the edge looked like. We also talked about the transition. As you'll see on the map right now, staff are proposing that we eliminate the transition zone as it was known in the last draft and in our conversation last week, and revert that area entirely to edge. So that would be treating everything along North Washington Street to the west of the road as the same, which would be that edge character area. So one of the questions, and we'll go through all of them and then talk, is the council in agreement with that? Do they support removing that transition and reverting everything to the edge as it was in the April 2024 draft?
Thank you. I believe that all of my colleagues were pretty clear on this last time. So I don't see any
Love
changes.
that.
Okay.
Great.
We're going to make this easy for you. I think.
I appreciate it.
We'll see. We'll see.
So now we have other choices to make. Now that we determined the geography, is what do we want the heights that are associated with that character area to look like? So several different combinations were thrown out last Monday. One option is 75 feet of base height, 25 feet of bonus height. That's what is currently in the plan for the edge. Another option is 75 feet of base height, 50 feet of bonus height. That's the height allowance that that transition zone had associated with it in the Planning Commission approved draft. There was also a proposal thrown out last week of 100 feet of base height with 25 feet of bonus height. We don't have to go with one of these options, but staff kind of looked at them and proposed these as the menu for you all to consider and discuss. And then staff's recommendation here would be that middle option of 75 feet of base height with 50 feet of bonus height. Our concern is that 100 feet of base height might be a pretty stark transition to some of the properties that are much lower density on the west. So we would prefer to keep that base height capped around 75. So our questions are which partials should be in the edge, we can check that off, as well as what should the base and bonus heights be. We'll continue and we'll talk about this for the rest of the section, and then we'll come back to these slides.
Thank you. Okay, there were two clarifying questions.
Yes.
Do you need that clarified now, or do you want to wait till?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Valero is first then.
And I apologize because I know you explained it during our last work session, but approximately how many floors are we talking when we talk about 75 feet, 25 feet?
75, you're practically looking probably at 6 stories.
Okay.
You may be able to get 7, but you're probably not.
Okay.
25 feet, you're looking at a maximum of 2. You might only get 1 depending on the construction type.
Thank you.
And 50 would be 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's about.
It's approximately like 10 to 14 feet per story, depending on, how it's designed and constructed.
So 125 could be 10 feet, 10 stories, sorry.
Yep, I think that's very reasonable.
Councilman Van Grack.
So I know there was some discussion of different builds and, potential use of why we're using 75. Can you clarify what is that maximum upper range for kind of the wood build before you get to the steel construction? And did that factor into the 75 number?
Yeah, so not an exact science, different organizations and industries will say it's a little bit different, but generally when you're looking at a podium, which is like a concrete podium, it typically tends to be higher, and then a stick build, so wood build on top, you're typically maxing out between 75 and 85 feet. After that, you need to go into a different construction type.
That was my understanding as well. Just wanted to clarify with
Yep.
staff.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to move along to a new character area. We have a new character unlocked here. And this we're calling the transit-oriented character area. We're not wedded to the name. If people prefer a different name, we can absolutely entertain that. But for the purposes of the discussion tonight, we're going to call it the transit-oriented area. So this is in response to discussion last week about wanting to see even higher heights and more intense uses along the 355 corridor and proximate to the metro station. So we have here 3 slides. Your staff report has these 3 maps as well, with 3 kind of different scenarios for this body to consider about what do we want that new character area to look like. So the first, we're looking at the yellow parcels on the map on the right side of your screen. This is looking at parcels that are within a 1/4 mile radius of the metro station and have frontage on Maryland 355. Those are the parcels that you see in yellow there. Scenario 2 is similar, but we're extending that radius to 1/2 mile instead of 1/4 mile. And again, we're looking at those parcels that have frontage on Maryland 355. And then our third scenario would be, what if we wanted everything up and down the corridor to have that higher land use designation? The yellow parcels that you see here is what would be included in that.
Can I ask a question just on
Yes,
this?
of course.
Clarifying question. So for when we had talked about, because I know I mentioned this last time, is that I was calling it 355 corridor because it really was tying into properties adjacent to 355. Some of these properties go beyond 355 now. So is there an option to just do
Absolutely. These are
355?
3 scenarios to throw out for discussion. We can absolutely talk about specific parcels and how we want to modify these maps.
But none of the scenarios do what we talked about last week was everything along 355. Some of them go, there's not an option that is just 355 and doesn't go in.
So the closest would be this scenario. There would be a few parcels that if we were only talking about touching 355, like this little guy would be removed. This guy right here would be removed, but this is pretty close to staff's understanding of wanting to see those that are along 355 having that
Okay,
designation.
perfect. Just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
So then once we decide the geography that we're interested in looking at for that corridor, high density, transit oriented zone, we do of course need to talk about what those heights would be. So again, 3 menus of options. We don't have to pick off this menu, but wanted to provide it for you. One option would be 200 feet of base height, which is the current height for base in the core, with 100 bonus height feet. So that would just be the difference between the core and this corridor. This transit oriented would be an additional 50 feet of bonus height. The middle option here is 250 feet of base height with 50 feet of bonus. So that would be an increase over what we're already seeing in the core with that base height of 200, but there's still a bonus option for additional MPDUs. And then a third option here is 300 feet outright with no bonus height. So this would be maximizing the density by right, not requiring any MPDUs to be developed in order to get that bonus. And then staff's recommendation here would be that middle option of 250 feet for base and then 50 feet of bonus height. And our questions again, what parcels should be included in that character area and what would we like the heights to be? Go ahead, Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for laying this out. I have my, I think, answers to your questions, but before giving them to you, I had a quick question on slides 11 and 12, scenarios 1 and 2.
Sure.
I'm looking at the southeast corner. You see those three small areas of purple
Yes.
In the bottom right-hand corner?
Yes.
Southeast side, my apologies.
Yep.
I see those replicated in scenario 2 as well.
Yes.
Just curious, I just don't understand, why weren't those also considered transit-oriented?
So these, are you talking about these ones that I have highlighted?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, because they do not have frontage on 355.
Oh, understood.
So staff's recommendation would actually be to go ahead and include those ones here because it feels a little disjointed to have part of that block and not the rest of the block. Staff would also propose that these parcels here that are off Monroe Place at Monroe Street be included as well. They're not included right now because they don't have that frontage, but it makes sense in staff's opinion to treat that whole block the same.
The bottom right-hand corner, there's like a, yeah.
Yes.
That part. Why is that the church or?
That's Veterans Park.
Veterans Park.
And it is outside of the quarter-mile radius, so that's why you don't see it in this scenario 1, but you will see it as yellow in scenario 2 because it is within the half-mile radius.
All right.
Yes, all of our parks have an underlying zone anyways. Obviously, that's a city-owned facility. I don't believe there are any plans to change that anytime soon.
It does not mean that we're changing the parks.
Correct.
It's just a thing where we don't have a
Zoning
park
is the
zone.
envelope of things you can do in the sandbox. It does not mean we are going to do all of those things.
Thank you. Continue.
Thank you. I would just answer the questions real
Wait,
quick.
can I just wait? We're
What's
going to
that?
wait to answer the questions until we hear the qualifiers. Is that okay?
That's cool.
Okay, thanks.
So before we go into the qualifiers for bonus height, one thing we do briefly want to talk about is layback slope because this was brought up last week. There's some information in your work session. I am not our resident expert. Our chief of zoning is the expert on all of this. But based on my conversations with him, kind of at the high level, the intent of the layback slope is to provide a transition between our residential zones and our commercial, our industrial, and our mixed use zones, which tend to be higher intensity and higher density. So the way that it's written in our ordinance right now, it applies all over the city. It's not unique to town center, is that when you have a residential zone that abuts one of these commercial, industrial, or residential or mixed use zones, an imaginary 30-degree line is drawn and the building needs to step back so it does not violate that 30-degree line. So regardless of what the base zoning allows for height on that property, you have to be below this 30-degree line that extends from the property line. So what we did here is you can see the parcels that are outlined in red. Those are parcels within town center that are adjacent to a residential zone. So those would absolutely have the layback slope applied to any future development that exists there. Now, the layback slope itself is in the zoning ordinance. As I mentioned earlier, it applies citywide. So if we wanted to see modifications to that, the town center master plan wouldn't be the most appropriate vehicle to do that. That would be through a zoning text amendment or through the zoning ordinance rewrite. I believe this is one thing that our consultants for the zoning ordinance rewrite are looking into. So we wouldn't recommend anything in this plan to actually change that because we wouldn't want it to be only to town center. We would want that to apply citywide. However, you will see in your staff report we do have an existing action. It's action 3.1.1 that talks about establishing building standards within town center. If the body is concerned about where the layback slope may or may not apply within development to town center, staff have proposed a modification to that action to explicitly say these standards need to address the transition to adjacent properties. So that way we have some policy direction that's in the same vein of the layback slope without forcing that zoning text amendment through the town center master plan.
Can I ask a clarifying question before we move on?
Yes.
So previously it was noted that the properties at Ivy League Lane would not qualify for the layback slope, but now we're hearing that they do.
So those properties themselves do not qualify.
But it's the property in front of it.
Adjacent to
Right,
it,
so-
yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
that is covered. And then North Adams, it was told to me that those properties in front of them wouldn't, but now this is saying it does.
So for this part, sorry.
I'm looking at, yeah,
This
it's very
part
small, but
does.
yes, it does, okay.
Here does not, because the zone here is MXT, that mixed use transition, and in our code, MXT is explicitly pulled out. The layback slope does not apply there.
So
it would up here because these zones are a residential zone.
Okay, so we heard some testimony this evening, that area would not be covered by the layback slope
Correct.
currently.
It's complicated. Our chief of zoning can certainly answer any technical nuanced questions about that.
And you are not considering, you're looking at, if there's a street, you're looking at the property that's closest, not like what's right across the street.
Yes.
In a residential, like.
Correct. We're
we
looking at
sometimes-
the confronting, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So then moving into our bonus height qualifiers. The question here is what should qualify for bonus height? So the past discussion that we've had was 5% additional MPDUs and that alone. The Planning Commission draft had 5% additional MPDUs give you some height. If you do 5% additional open and public use space, that gives you some additional height, totaling up to a maximum possible height. You can see here on this slide, you've seen these charts before. These are the charts that show the proposed maximum bonus height in the April draft. At that point, we only had core and edge, so it was 50 and 20 feet, as well as the calculation that the Planning Commission used to get to 50 feet of bonus height for the core and the transition, which is now going away, as well as 25 feet for the edge.
Can I ask just a quick question
Yes.
about this? Is there a challenge where you could, I'm looking at this September draft option. Okay, so what if we have this September draft option, but in addition to that, there's the option of someone could get all the height through affordable housing? Is that flexibility to be able to put that in the plan that you can either do all affordable, or you can also mix it with affordable and the green?
I think in theory, yes. Practically, we would need to determine the differentiation between, are we asking them to do that same 5% for both? Because in that case, I'm
applying it just to affordable.
Correct. Yeah. But right now, in the September draft, I'll use the core as an example. 5% additional MPDUs would give you 35 feet of height. So if we wanted to create a scenario where 50 feet of height was for MPDUs, we would need to determine what that threshold would be. It probably wouldn't make sense to keep it at 5%, because then why would anyone do the green space addition? So we would need to differentiate. In theory, it's possible. We just need to work out the logistics.
And this is a question I shared with the team. Do you have a recommendation? And you can come back to me, but I just want to note that I asked that question of like, what is the recommendation? If mayor and council, because I heard people saying, some of my colleagues saying, we really are trying to get more affordable as well. But we also want to encourage, if someone is going to do green, they should be incentivized to do green as well.
Yep, absolutely. So the question here is what improvement should qualify? Staff's recommendation is this case is just the affordable housing. Certainly that's something we want direction from this body on.
Councilmember Shaw.
I would just like to move forward with only the affordable housing.
And we haven't seen, go ahead, Councilmember Shaw, go ahead.
And I know that also includes, I know there is some common space with that that's already required, right? And they
That's
could
correct.
use that with having green space, but I would like to move forward with only affordable housing.
Thank you. Can you go back to the chart as well, just so we can see it? So when I sent the question about what would it look like for if we were to have the two options, is there something that you can share so that that could be a viable option to consider?
We haven't prepared anything in advance. On the fly, we can attempt to come up with something on that. That's probably something to bring back on the 6th.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Fulton.
I just share, I agree with Councilmember Shaw for the complexity reason that you so well articulated in our focus on affordable housing. And I think I mentioned it last week too. If there is more that we want in the area of green and common space, we should make that change globally. But the focus on affordable housing, I'd make it simpler.
Councilmember Jackson, then Councilmember Van Grack.
No, I'll be brief. I agree with Councilmember Fulton and Councilmember Shaw. I think the focus should be on affordable housing.
Councilmember Van Grack.
And I really do want to see a green space encouragement. That being said, we're at a stage now where we're trying to make things simple and a direction. And so while I support my colleagues in just making it straightforward to encourage affordable housing, but I don't want staff to lose sight of kind of what they were encouraging, what the Planning Commission was encouraging with the green space.
Thank you. Councilmember Valeri and then Dr. Miles, or Dr. Miles? You go first, Dr. Miles. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, staff. I've evolved on this one. I'll just make it simple and go with housing, affordable housing. That's all.
Though on some level it pains me to say this because I do like talking about green space. I think that given the constraints of town centers space-wise, that the focus on affordable housing be it as far as bonus height.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we'll go back to some of our height questions. Excuse the slide transfer here. Let's start with our edge character area. So we agreed on the geography in question here. We would like to have some discussion amongst this body for the heights associated with it.
Councilmember Fulton?
I don't mean to introduce additional complexity, but I heard you say that the podium plus stick build is somewhere like 75 to 85. So can we entertain, I'm wondering if my colleagues want to entertain the option of the base of 85 to make sure that whatever it is that would be the most affordable is available without any needs. So I guess I'm proposing an option that's not here of a minimum of a base of 85.
Councilmember Jackson, then Councilmember Van Grack.
Sorry. No, but I would support that.
Councilmember Van Grack.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's one of the reasons why I asked the question before. I think Councilmember Fulton and Jackson are on. I think having that base of 85, which is where they would go with the stick build, for us to encourage through affordable housing, getting them up to that steel build, which could be significantly advantageous. But what we're saying is base is what they would do with the stick build. I think it's a great idea and I support it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Am I volunteering you? Did you have your hand up?
I'm being voluntold is what I'm being
Councilmember
told.
Valeri.
No, I would be completely cool with shifting the base up with the caveat that I would really want to see the bonus then being the 50 feet.
So just to clarify, you're not changing the bonus, you're just adding to the base. So it
correct.
actually increases the total height.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's what you were meaning to say as well, Councilmember Fulton. Okay, cool. Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I associate myself with our colleagues to my right, the two colleagues to my right.
Well,
immediate
all
right.
the colleagues.
All the colleagues.
Okay. Councilmember Shaw.
I also associate myself with my colleagues.
All right. You're getting
So
an
to
easy
confirm,
evening.
we're hearing 85 feet of base height with 50 feet of bonus height for affordable housing. Love it. All right, now we're moving on to the transit-oriented areas. We have one slide here that shows staff's recommendation here. So looking at scenario 2 for the areas that are in yellow, again, with the caveat that we think these purple parcels off of Church Street should be made yellow, and we think the rest of this block bounded by Monroe Place and Monroe Street should also go from purple to yellow. Staff's recommendation for height is 250 feet of base with 50 bonus.
Thank you. Can I just, back to the previous discussion, just since we talked about layback slope, I just want to go on record that I have concern about there's not being a layback slope in the area on North Adams. I appreciate that you added and we corrected the record that Ivy League Lane would be covered, but there is residential homes. There are residential homes, and there's this one little strip without. So that is something that concerns me. So I just wanted to go on record in saying that. Okay. So I have a question. Was there an option to do the base height of 225 and 75 I know that's something that I've raised. But
There absolutely can be.
Okay.
Just like before, this is kind of some options. The math can kind of get to wherever. I think the biggest thing that staff feels pretty strongly about is that total between base and bonus should get to 300 feet. That's the tallest zone allowed in Montgomery County, which is what their metro stations are zoned. So for consistency, we think we should get to that number in some way. How we do that math, staff are open to direction and other ideas there.
Okay, and then the other comment I'll make is, I think this should be called 355 corridor because hopefully the whole city eventually will be transit oriented. So, right, like you want to be able to get to anything that on bus or train. There are lots of places in the city that are transit oriented. I don't think that's clear. This is 355. I think is a more clarifying terminology. I see a couple heads. Okay. So just to clarify the title so people know the area we're talking about. And the reason why I mentioned 225, 75, I was just trying to encourage, as much, we talked about the COG housing goals. I was trying to encourage the more affordable piece because we do need to increase that affordable metric. And I just don't know that 50 does it like that. So that's why I was trying to get to 300 in a different way. So I just wanted to propose that option. Dr. Miles, are you looking? You want to say something? Okay. All right.
Repeat what you said.
225 for base, and I'll just say I raised the corridor last week, but I was just trying to do 225 base and 75 bonus to just encourage to get to more affordable units. So I don't know that 50 will get us there, but Councilmember Dr. Miles, you said no. And you were going to say something, and then Councilmember Valera, and then Councilmember Fulton.
Just super quickly on that. I'm in agreement with calling this the 355 corridor area. I'm hopeful that we see this continue down 355 and perhaps up 355 and make it seamless. I want to just clarify, because we haven't decided on which of the definitions yet on
Scenarios, you mean?
scenarios. Yes, thank you. How are we defining this 355 corridor area? And then however we're going to do that, I keep noting that much like the other side of town center, there's also a historic church in the lower corner as well, and how that will be affected by this discussion as well.
So that would be potentially taking the scenarios first before you get to this height, if that's okay. Are you guys okay with that? All right. Can we go to the scenarios?
So as a reminder, our scenario 1, quarter mile, again, only touching 355 here. Scenario 2, which is looking at that 1/2 mile radius. And then scenario 3, which is kind of along the full extent of the corridor.
Okay. Councilmember Van Grack.
I just want to address something that I know staff said with regard to most of these scenarios. I would ask and want my colleagues' thoughts about staff's suggestion to take those lower parcels that don't have the frontage to 355 and include them for conformity into the 355 corridor area, just because I think from staff's perspective, and as Dr. Miles pointed out, I think it makes sense.
And that is Park, right? I think there's those are the townhomes, just to clarify what staff, those are the business townhomes?
I think what Councilman Van Grack was saying was to add these ones off of Church Street in and these ones off Monroe Place in. Is that consistent?
Okay.
Okay.
What zone would the business townhomes that I think, was it Dr. Miles who asked a question about?
So it depends on the scenario here. In this instance, actually in all of these instances, that business park, I believe that you're talking about is up here and it's in the edge.
No, not those townhomes, sorry.
Different townhomes.
The ones that are by RM, Richard Montgomery.
Those are here. Oh, there we go.
It's by like Jefferson Plaza, and I can't tell on this.
Yes,
It's very
yeah,
small.
so that's edge.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Sir.
So does anyone have questions in general on scenario 1, 2, or 3? Because then we'll just go down. You guys, there's not a map that has all of them, right? A slide that has.
We can click forward and click back really quick, but we do
Does
not
anyone
have one
wanna
slide that
see
shows
a
everything.
particular scenario again? Okay.
We have scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3.
And you said that staff was recommending scenario 2. Can you provide further rationale as to that?
Yeah, so, a 1/2 mile radius is typically deemed as like a transit-oriented radius. That's considered walkable to transit stations. We suspect most of the development that we're going to see along 355 is going to be in this corridor. There's obviously opportunities further north. Frankly, one of the reasons we're suggesting scenario 2 is because when we look at scenario 3, which is going all the way up, we don't love that we have our 355 corridor zone coming up right against the edge and there's nothing in the middle to kind of transition between. Now we've decided 85 feet here and, potentially 300 feet here. So staff felt like scenario 2 encapsulates and encompasses a reasonable distance from our metro station. It encapsulates the 355 frontage and simply gives a little bit more opportunity for increased development than scenario 1, which is only that 1/4 mile.
And can you also just discuss the difference on that upper part? Perhaps there's more adjacency to, is there any adjacency to residential? On the right side,
on the
east side of Rockville, I should say.
Up here? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so like up in that right.
So yes, on the other side of the train tracks, there is residential there. So we have, the CSX and the Metro line, but it would be visible from the Lincoln Park neighborhood that's over here on the east.
Okay. And because it's not right up against it, there would be no layback slopes.
Correct. I believe so. I'll confirm with our chief of zoning on that.
Yeah, that's important to me to know.
I will confirm. I've been focused on this geography here, the immediate within the planning area, but I can confirm that with our chief of zoning.
Is that something that we will get this evening at some point or no?
I'm not sure. We can see. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to flag it because I just want to make sure I understand the impact on the Lincoln Park neighborhood. Councilman Van Grack.
I would just propose, as opposed to actually getting into that concern, whether there is a consensus with regard to scenario 2 while including those 3 parcels in the 355 corridor.
So you like scenario 2?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
With the inclusion of the 3 parcels.
Yep. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for letting me talk that through because I was just thinking there are residential that we're looking so much at Town Center, but there's residential on the right, and I just have a concern about that for Lincoln Park. Councilmember Valeri.
I have a look of consternation, only because this issue has not come up in similar analogous developments in the city where ostensibly residential is even closer than the Lincoln Park community would be to that area. So in the interest of consistency, I think we can still have the discussion on the layback zone and the reality of, what it is like to have this much height next to so much less height. But as far as the other side of the tracks, I would just want consistency where perhaps there was none before.
Any other comments? Councilmember Jackson, are you? No? Councilmember Shaw, do you have a preference? Which scenario do you like? Oh, you don't?
Sorry.
Councilmember Valeri, do you,
I
what
was like-
scenario? So you're based on your comments, are you suggesting scenario 3? Councilmember Van Grack suggested scenario 2.
No,
Based on your comments, where are you?
I like actually scenario 2 for the reasons that staff
Okay,
gave
all right, that's
as
good.
well.
Councilmember Fulton.
Unfortunately, I actually have a question too. I am inclined to want, for the reasons the mayor said, like it's the 355 corridor, it should just go up and down 355. Councilmember Valeri made a point last time too about like how does it connect to everything else?
Yeah.
It would really help me to know what the zoning is immediately north and immediately south, because I don't know that we need to be going up and down, but we also do, I think, need to be a little bit thoughtful about what's happening around those areas.
Yeah, consistent.
Sorry, I didn't think to ask that question earlier.
No, that's okay. I didn't know.
Thank you. Any other comments on scenario? So, Councilmember Fulton, you're more information, or do you have a scenario?
I would benefit from more information, but if it comes down to it, I would be scenario 3.
Okay, and I will just note, we do have one more work session, so if we need more information, we could, and people are feeling uncomfortable, we could come back to this. So I want to give you an out if you need it to get the data. Dr. Miles, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I associate myself with comments of Councilmember Fulton. I'm cool with 3. I could use more info, but 3 works for me.
Thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
I associate myself with Dr. Miles and Councilmember Fulton.
Okay. Councilmember Shaw.
I could really use some more information.
Okay.
So I'm hearing staff will come back on the 6th. We will confirm the layback slope, what would apply for the properties on the east. We will also come back with information about the zoning outside of the planning area immediately to the north along 355, immediately to the south along 355. Is there any other data requests that the body would like to see for the 6th on this? Okay, staff will
Thank
prepare
you.
accordingly.
But we do have a new name for the court.
All right, we're going to transition into, I think, 2 or 3 final slides. Mr. Reitelbach's going to take it away.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, since you asked a data question, is there something, so like, let's say there people want to like, there's some desire for consistency. Just because the way we're treating the layback slopes as they are now doesn't mean it has to be that way in the future, right? Like, there could be some consistency of, this is going to getting close to a neighborhood. We're going to
Yes.
consider this, because that's both
Yep.
on the east, is also on North Adams. So
Yep.
I just wanted to flag that there's opportunity for additional discussion.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And that would probably be best addressed through the ZOR or a text amendment.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure we have all of our options. Do you need? Can we take a 5-minute break? Okay, thank you. Good evening, Rockville. Today is December 16. Welcome back to meeting number 29-24. We're continuing our discussion on Rockville Town Center Master Plan. And just wanted to make sure that I don't think we finished the bonus piece yet, right?
I believe we did. I'm not waiting on anything else.
Can you go back to the bonus slide just so we can look at it again? Not the qualifiers, but the heights for scenarios. So I think we tabled a scenario, whether we're going to do scenario 2 or 3. We're debating 2 or 3. I know staff is going to come back with additional information, but the actual bonus piece.
Yes, yes, that is correct.
Okay,
And then
thank
we
you.
have not had a discussion about the height.
Thank you. Councilmember Fulton?
So I was reflecting on what we just did for the transition area and the 85 edge, I'm sorry, the edge. Could we do something similar here where we got to a good height, but also encourage the affordable housing by doing something like 235, 85, 235, 100, something like that, that gets a lot of height, is a similar rationale and proportion to what we just did on the edge. Wonder what my colleagues' thoughts are.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulton. Yeah, I was trying to get, my goal was to try to get additional bonus in this, so I appreciate your proposal. Councilmember Shaw?
I would like to do the 235 and 100 for bonus for more affordable housing.
Thank you, Councilmember Van Grack.
I fully support that idea. I think it's consistent with the percentage of bonus that we're looking for the edge, and also has a significant amount of base to encourage development. And so I think it could accomplish all of the council's goals.
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson.
No, thank you. I appreciate the goals that we have and the base and the bonus. I just have a question for staff, which is, I thought that 300 was the number that you said the county has,
That's correct. That's their tallest zone.
but we can go over that if we,
We can do whatever we want.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Then I support it.
We have home rule. Thank you to our planning department.
So to clarify for
Wait,
staff.
Wait, we have one more person I
Okay.
want to hear. Oh, 2 more people I want to hear from. Councilmember Larry.
I am cool with 235 and 100. I am also cool with continuing this going south on 355.
Thank you. Councilmember Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I associate myself with my colleagues with regard to the 235 limit.
Thank you.
So 235 base, 100 bonus for a total of 335. Great.
And you'll come back to us to discuss the.
With that additional.
scenarios. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Before we grind to a halt.
The next topic is parking.
Good evening. Yes, the fourth and final topic is parking. And I know there was a lot of discussion among you all last week, and you asked staff to bring back some more information, do some research, provide you all with some more information. And so we have provided a lot of that to you. One of the questions you all did ask was, how do reductions in parking minimums affect housing costs? And so just some of the information about that is that the cost of garage parking is approximately $1,700 per year and can be an additional 17% of rent for renters. And minimal parking costs can result in reduced housing costs and increased affordability. So we have provided you all with a bibliography of studies, reports, articles, case studies that go into this in more depth, provide more information, and all of that was provided in the staff report in the meeting packet. And there was also some questions about how developments in Montgomery County have been affected by the elimination of parking requirements. And there are really 3 developments that have come through in Montgomery County since they passed that zoning text amendment. And all 3 of those are continuing to provide parking. 2 of those MHP Amherst and Loman's Plaza are still providing more parking than even what they would have been required prior to that zoning text amendment having been approved. And then Springvale Terrace, is the only one that is proposing fewer parking spaces than what would have been required prior to Montgomery County's passage of the zoning text amendment that eliminated parking requirements. And so we do recognize there was additional information that you all requested, and we're still gathering that, and we'll provide that to you by the next work session on January the 6th. That includes an updated occupancy number and methodology for parking in the garages here in Town Center, garages A, B, and C. That includes a forecast with vacancies filled, such as with the Trader Joe's spot, the Gordon Biersch spot, those spots being filled. What would parking be once those are active spaces? And then finally, a parking plan and how would that function?
Thank
Yes.
you. Councilman Brashaw.
I also asked for a social equity impact analysis for some of our most vulnerable groups in terms of parking. And I think you can reference the ZTA, Racial Equity and Social Justice Study of the county for, I think it was ZTA 20-10.
Yes, we can have that information for January the 6th as well.
Thank you. So this is a topic that will come back to us.
Yes.
And then just to note, for the county properties where you showed what the reduction was, would you just include in the chart also like number of units?
We can do that, certainly.
Thank you, because it just helps us understand the ratios. Councilmember Fulton.
On that note, because I'm just frantically looking right now, number of units and also what type of facility it is. If my Google search is right, Springvale Terrace is an assisted living facility, which might account for why there's less parking spaces than for the other ones. So just type of residence as well.
Okay, we can certainly do that.
And are these were just approved, so are they not done yet, or are they done?
That's correct. They've been entitled, but they are not built. That text amendment went into effect in March.
Okay, so we don't know actual impacts yet.
Yes.
It's just
It's a little
proposed.
too soon to tell.
Right, because I do know, like, for example, yes, there might be people who are in assisted living facility those who are there, residents may not need a car, but we don't know what the staffing situation is looking like, or caregivers or visitors, more likely visitors and family, what that's looking like as of yet. Is there any other data that might help us with that?
Specific for Montgomery County, we've had several conversations with their team, and because it's not been a year since their legislation has been in effect, they were kind of like, this is the best we have. It's a little bit too soon to draw concrete conclusions.
But are there other jurisdictions that might help? Because I do think that having a live example might help understand the concept.
We can look into other jurisdictions and see what we can pull together.
Thank you. Councilman Brashaw, Councilmember Valeri, you go ahead.
Sure.
I don't think you had a chance to speak on this.
No, I want to say thank you to staff for the extensive case studies list and in general the bibliography. I was very appreciative of it. I know that I did share with my colleagues a report on, in general, parking and how it can affect members of the disability community. And so I think that that's extremely important to consider. I am struck so much by the MHP Amherst. I am familiar generally with that area, but I am just absolutely struck by the difference between the parking spaces required and what they're proposing. And I think that, I know a little bit, Loman's Plaza is almost a wash, right? And knowing what Springvale Terrace is, the type of residential housing it is, but, even removing a minimum, we're not seeing it go down to 0 from 197 for Amherst. We're seeing it go up to 461, which kind of makes that argument that each proposed development is going to take into consideration their own calculus and calculations. So I just wanted to say thank you. And I really do appreciate it. I am looking forward to more data on, like hard data on the utilization of the garages in town center, and any way that we can kind of level set and get away from how people feel about parking in town center and more into the reality of parking in town center. I think that that will also help us to inform our decision on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw.
I also want to echo my colleagues, Councilmember Valeri's comment in terms of thanking staff for the research. When I went through the research, I didn't see anything around the small business impact. It seemed to be primarily focused on housing, and recognizing that this decision, in addition to housing, is also how we can grow and nurture our small businesses in our business center, which is town center. I would just like to see a little bit more information on that. And I think the studies on how the garages are being used would be helpful. But if you can somehow balance all of the studies that were only focused on housing and helping to make that decision. I will also say for the stat that you had for the 17%, when I was looking at the sources, I think that was Greg and Pierce study, which was written in 2017. A lot of the sources seem to be from the 1990s, which means the data was a little bit old. Also, I didn't see anything in there around businesses as well. And so and also living in town center and knowing and renting in town center and knowing what I pay as well as some of the other adjacent buildings, that number, it just seems very off to me from like my lived experience there. So I see that it was like very centered on the slide, but it just doesn't seem accurate. And so I do look forward to receiving more information, particularly around how we can make a decision to nurture our businesses.
Thank you for those comments. One other data for the chart, since I opened the can and my colleague opened the can on different data as well, and on equity and what type of building it is. MHP Amherst, that has some public nonprofit involvement. Is that right?
I believe it does. I'm not super familiar with it. I would have to do more
Okay.
research, but I believe it
Because
does.
that's good to know, because that might have an impact on what a public-esque entity was willing to do and put forward, and how they had equity in mind. So I just need more information about who they are and what was the goal. I think MHP here is Montgomery Housing Partnership. Is that right? Okay.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. All right. So is there anything else that you have any questions for us? I know that we have another work session coming up.
So certainly we have the information we discussed today relative to the 355 corridor character area that we'll bring back. We have much parking data that we need to research and bring back for the 6th. If there is anything else that this body would like to see brought up on the 6th, now would be a great time to let staff know so we can prepare accordingly and get it in your staff report.
Councilman Van Graag.
I just want to echo my colleague, Councilmember Shaw's issue, because I know that I brought up last time some of my concerns with regard to parking also involve the economic development. I'm not sure what data could be involved with regard to trying to figure out to the extent parking minimums or the lack thereof could have an effect on our business community, because I know that this council has talked about not only just housing, but also economic development. And again, to the extent there is potential data to show that potentially even eliminating parking minimums could help the residential, the economic development. I'm not sure what data is there, but if there is some either studies or analysis in that direction to help guide us, it'd be helpful.
Councilmember Fulton.
Reminds me, in terms of other direction, I should just reiterate, I am in favor of eliminating parking minimums throughout the planning area. But I also understand that we are data-driven and we should get the data to help my colleagues make a decision. While we're doing that, I think it was the mayor that raised an idea last week that I also supported, which would be if there is a possibility of asking developers, what's your plan? Like, not have a minimum, but make sure that there's some way to consider it. So if we are coming back to discuss this again, to know, like, is that a viable option? How would we go about doing it would be useful as well.
That's on staff's list. Yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
No, thank you, Mayor. I was going to make council member of Fulton's point earlier. I think the mayor had a good idea to have developers present a plan. So I want to thank staff as well for all the work that you've done and for the data that you're going to bring back to us so that we can continue this conversation. But I don't want the mayor's idea to have that plan by the developers fall through the cracks. So if we could get more information on that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Van Grack and then Councilmember Shaw.
I mean, whatever we do, having a plan is critical. So I do support that. But this brought up another question. If we're kind of going to be moving on towards kind of next steps, I did have a question for staff. I know that you talk generally, and you've even put together in our agenda booklet this idea of eliminating the parking minimums throughout all of town center. But then there was also the distance from the transit centers where there was an area that was excluded. Other than the fact that there's uniformity, which I think you talked about at our last work session as a reason for just jettisoning the distance and just including all, was there any other reason for just wrapping in that other section in the elimination of the parking minimums other than consistency?
Not really.
Okay.
Uniformity, and that was the direction of the Planning Commission.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw.
I also agree with asking developers to have a parking plan. If we were to eliminate parking minimums, the decision would be on the housing developer, correct?
If it was being redeveloped into housing, yes. Whoever the developer were, regardless of if it was an office building, a housing building, mixed use, whatever it would be.
And what it looks like now is that the majority of the developers and the owners are housing developers, correct?
In town center, that's what we're seeing primarily, yes.
So that housing developer would likely not think about the broader use of the businesses and or what's needed for the businesses when they're making the decision, just on their
It's
development.
possible. Most developers are looking at, metrics and data for the entire area, including the businesses. It's hard for me to say if, how they're going to prioritize the needs. I would assume that if somebody is proposing housing, that they're primarily concerned with parking for their residents in their housing development. But I can't really speak about how any one developer might feel broadly.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two questions, and I see some additional hands. Sorry. I will go to Councilmember Jackson and then Councilmember Lay. Just two quick questions, and I'll cede the floor. For the buildings that charge for overnight parking, like I believe in towns, the Moorguard property, for one example, and I believe at least Moorguard, they have separated residential and commercial parking. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And like Comstock, for example, is separated, is not separated. Is that correct?
I don't know off of the top of my head. I suspect the Comstock properties have a section that is more general and then a section that is either fobbed or gated for their residents, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw.
It's not.
It's not.
So, okay. And then Metropolitan, that might be good information to know. Metropolitan, I think, might be the same, but I'm not sure. So I would like to know that, because I think the difference is the way that the properties treat the two different areas, that might have an impact on the tenant and resident experience. I'm just curious about that information. And then I'm wondering, I'm thinking very hard about For instance, we know that there may be an affordable housing complex being developed on 41 Maryland Avenue. I want to make sure that those residents and people in those units have equitable access to parking as the residents who are at Boulevard 44 and Ansel. So that question might help solve that. Would they be, for example, be given the opportunity at the same rate and access point? Councilmember Shaw. And I'm sorry.
I want to,
On that point, right?
yes,
Okay.
I just to build off of your point, Madam Mayor, I want to make sure that all residents that are moving, all new residents that are moving in have equitable parking as well.
Yeah. That is something that I didn't want a situation where you had a building that's focused on affordable, looking at a building that's mostly market rate and feeling the difference. So that's the juxtaposition that I wanted to better understand. Councilmember Jackson and Councilmember Valeri.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I didn't have a question, but I'm just sitting here and thinking, and I just throw it out there to ascertain if it's possible or if it's not. But we have these three different areas now. We have the 355 corridor, we have the core, and then we have the edge. Is there any reason why we can be discussing parking requirements in each area?
You absolutely could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Valeri and then Dr. Miles.
Just to reiterate, I am also in the camp of removing the parking minimums. Just to reiterate one point is that I want to remain competitive with the county. I think that we're able to do that if we remove parking minimums in Part A. B, we've talked a lot about affordable housing, and I would like to see if it's out there, because you presented in the bibliography a study that, yes, while dated, is still a quantifiable study that shows that there is an increase in rental rates with the inclusion of garage parking. If there are additional studies, that would be helpful to know, or alternately, that not including it makes rents go up, which I would struggle with understanding, but maybe it's out there. I think that that's a really important consideration. If it is able to keep, in that portion, keep rents more affordable or ownership more affordable, and we know that supply is also going to do that, it just doesn't make sense for us as a body to not seriously consider and pass, no parking minimums if our end goal is increasing the affordability of living in the city. And that's kind of my bottom line on this. But I look forward to further discussions, maybe some more studies. Maybe I'm the only nerd up here that really wants to read more studies. But it can only help me to make a better decision.
Thank you. I think many of the body has asked for more data, so I think that we have a couple nerds up here. You're in good company.
I love nerds.
Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As indicated last week, I am in favor of removing the parking minimums, but I am willing to associate myself with my colleague, particularly Councilmember Fulton. I'm not opposed to getting more data, but I'm good with the elimination thereof, given the extant data regarding parking lot usage that we do know about.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions? All right. The other thing I was going to ask, since I think Councilmember Shaw was commenting on businesses, do we know the opinion of the retail businesses? Have we heard from them in your feedback?
Can you elaborate on that? Like, have they been involved in this process?
No, just on this parking question, because that was like a hot debate in 2019, but I'm not sure if I've heard anything.
I personally have not heard from any actual business establishments.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard from folks that own retail property about their thoughts on it, but not from the actual tenants themselves.
Thank you. I think that's helpful. So tenants commercial tenants, in addition to all tenants, can still give feedback so that they're informing the mayor and council. And do we have any more of those Rockville Town Center cards? I mean, can that be given just to get the retail businesses? I mean, we need them to thrive, and
Yeah.
maybe one or the other might support them more.
Sure. Yeah, we have a whole stack of those kind of like half-page flyers in our office.
Maybe we can work with Ready to just share them. I think then we are closing this agenda item. Thank you so much for all the data. I think we have taken what the Planning Commission has given us and done a lot of work on it. I want to thank the Planning Commission. I want to thank all the residents. I want to thank staff. You put in a lot of work here, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. We look forward to the next work session on January 6th.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I did want to make one comment about January 6th. Do you have a comment for them, a question for them before they go? Yes? Okay, Councilmember Shaw.
I think also I asked to bring back how many owners there are. I think there's a smaller number of owners in the.
Yes, so we're working on that. I
Okay.
can't recall at the top of my head if it's in the staff report. We might have cut it because we were dealing with a deadline to get a packet out,
Oh,
but
no
yes,
worries.
we will get that.
Thank you.
Thank you for working very quickly.
It is in your staff report. It is on page 301 is a chart that shows the existing multifamily residential rental properties and their ownership.
Councilmember Larry.
And that's just for town center, correct?
Correct.
Not needed right away, but I'd love to see that context for the entire city to kind of show if it's a pattern or it's an outlier.
We can work on that. I can't guarantee it by the 6th. That's a bigger task, but we can absolutely work with our development services team on getting that.
No rush. I didn't mean to drop that on you, but I just had that thought.
Thank you. Just for city manager, Ms. Taylor, city clerk, for the listening public, anyone, in case anyone's trying to follow our next meeting for January 6th, I believe that will now be starting at 6:30. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. We'll now be moving on to our mock agenda. So the mock agenda has the old time, but we're going to adjust it just for the listening public. Councilmember Shaw.
I may have missed this, but is there a proclamation for MLK? Are we presenting a proclamation for MLK in January?
It's Lunar New Year in January. MLK doesn't really get a proclamation. We do in February African American history.
And you do a large ceremony, but
and we
could.
do a big ceremony. Yeah.
I would like to ask my colleagues if we could do an MLK proclamation in January.
I support it. I mean, I think that we're going to talk about MLK Day on that day anyway, and I think why not have a proclamation to talk about it? But I know that my colleagues were going to have a discussion about proclamations generally about the number. So, Councilmember Lloyd, did you have a comment?
That was kind of my comment. Was I thought that we had coming up on our future agenda talking about proclamations and certificate of recognition, because similarly I was distressed that we were unable to acknowledge World AIDS Day in December, and I still think it's something that the topic is still something that we need to wrestle with.
We do have that staff report ready, but it wasn't ready to go for this meeting, so I moved it. I won't put it on January 6th to get through Town Center, but it'll be on the 13th.
Councilmember Shaw?
So I recognize that we have a lot of proclamations and we have our process to go through. I also recognize the importance of MLK, and not everyone who will be attending the event may attend our meeting. And I think there's different groups there that will see that observation. So I just wanted to ask my colleagues again if we can add MLK proclamation to our January 6th meeting.
Thank you. Can I just close the lease mock agenda, because that's kind of a old new business. Are you guys okay? We're moving into old new business. All right. I think I've spoken, but it sounds like Dr. Miles?
I'd support MLK proclamation, notwithstanding or keeping in mind that we are going to have a broader discussion on proclamations.
Thank you. And so I know the city manager's report sometimes covers the MLK Day, so if we do a proclamation, then we might shift those comments to the proclamation, so that will cover the time. Dr. Miles?
Quick question for our colleague, Councilmember Shaw. Would it be a proclamation that had to be read here versus at the program itself?
Councilmember Shaw, sorry.
Well,
sorry,
if you do it
Councilmember.
here, you can read it again at the actual event as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's exclusive. And, we could, we're shortening our proclamation, so it can be just a couple of paragraphs to acknowledge Dr. Martin Luther King.
Councilmember Jackson?
Yes, I just want to say I support Councilmember Shaw.
Councilmember Van Grack?
So I actually support everything that's been said. Not only do I support a proclamation for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but I also think it's important for us to focus in our future discussion about proclamations and make sure that everything, including World AIDS Day, the things that we feel important are properly recognized by the city.
Thank you.
I know it's been a while, but you were sent a review of everything. If you all could take a look at that. It's changed, but not the part that we need you all to review. So if you all could look over that, review it, provide some comments, that'll help our presentation on this a lot easier.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor-Farrell, I did provide feedback. Thank you to your staff for allowing me to sit down with you. One of the things I requested is just an updated spreadsheet, because I think there were one or two things that I had questions about, but perhaps that updated spreadsheet can be shared with all of my colleagues so they're looking at the latest version. Is that okay?
Sure, and we'll share the staff report as well.
Okay, there were just a couple of proclamations that I was like, we did that before, but I didn't see it on the list, so I just asked them to add, and I'm sure you all may have a few that you may want as well. Okay, so we have previously included a recognition and awareness about the Dr. Martin Luther King Day event and the city manager's report. We're going to shift that to mayor and council doing a proclamation. Okay. All right. Any other items for old new business? Councilmember Valeri.
Yes, so seeing that on our agenda this evening was an MPDU agreement that we've now agreed to. It made me wonder about the employee housing program. Every time that these come online and we don't have the housing program up and running for our employees, that's another missed opportunity for them to look into affordable housing so they can live in the city where they work. So I just wanted to throw that out there to my colleagues. This is kind of a unfinished sentence that I actually think began before we were all elected, and is something that as each of these new projects comes online, if we don't get moving on this, then there will be less opportunities for our staff to take advantage of the program.
I know I'm a broken record on this topic too. I do 100% want to help our employees. We know that we funded the program in FY24. I would hope that we can get some updated information. I know the city manager is working through our housing piece, but I'm hopeful that can happen before the summer, before the next fiscal year. So just, and then you don't have to give us an answer now, but just know that that's something that I know that people are interested in, with the goal of, like, we have these new units coming online in the MPDU housing. We've got more of a flood than we had in the past term, and so we just want to make sure there's opportunity for employees to be able to think about. And maybe it's like we need some more time to structure the program, but at least employees can start thinking about when these units come online, whether that's a viable option for them. So maybe there could be like information of it's coming and then give staff more time to get the program implemented.
Exactly what I'm thinking.
Okay, and then related to that, I sent some questions on this topic. Just want to get a sense of how we're doing on our Rockville waiting list, because we do keep a list of, and don't have to tell me a number now, but just want to make sure we're continuing to growing the Rockville waiting list, and that we're putting out information maybe in Rockville reports or whatever channels and ways that we're communicating to be able to let people know in Rockville that you can sign up for this list. You do have to, do something, get a certification in advance to be able to take advantage of some of these units that are coming online. Ms. Mihalik, did I interrupt you? I don't know if you were going to say something. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Councilmember Valeri?
On that point, making sure that those notices are multilingual as well. And I can't recall the last few that I saw. I think they are, but intentional outreach starts with accessible language. So.
Thank you. I have a few small things. I hate to even bring this up, but it's been in the news. Last term, the mayor and council asked that staff consider what is our policy on drones. There's a variety of reasons of why drones are helpful in terms of real estate marketing, and I know some of our news outlets use it, our traffic monitors use it, but we are seeing or hearing about other states that are dealing with it, and maybe that we can coordinate with the county and the state on what are we doing about drones. We know there's a recreational use, but there appear to be some potentially, drones in other states that are questionable. So, Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Some of y'all might recall way back, previous mayor and council, it was an agenda item, but we never got a date for it to discuss drones. So I think it's timely that it come back up. That's all.
It was before our city manager's time. But there was a, Ms. Moran may remember, there used to be this action report, and it was at the top, but never made it. So we want to give you time to talk to, staff and just say, what do you recommend? And it could be that we have something that we talk about as an agenda item. It could be that staff is working at the staff level with the county and the state to figure out a response, but just, it seems like something should be considered.
Yeah.
The other small thing is the REAP program. We've talked about this in the housing section. It's starting to have an impact on some residents in Rockville who could potentially have applied for the 60% AMI when it was available to the county. Now it's reduced in terms of eligibility on 30% through the county program. And so I know staff is looking at potentially what the impact is, how much money is needed. I just want to put out there, if there's something that is emergency where you need something from this mayor and council, I believe this body was open to that. And so since there's pressing time-sensitive needs, I just wanted to put that out there, that we're open to discussing how we can be helpful on that. I'm not seeing any other hands. So it looks like we might be concluding our meeting. This is the last meeting. Bless you.
Bless you.
Last meeting of the year, but I wanted to say thank you to staff and thank you to our residents, thank you to our commissions, to all who make up Rockville, our businesses. It's been quite a year, and I can't believe it's coming to an end already, but I wish everyone a very, very happy holiday season, and we hope everyone gets some much-needed rest and connection with family. Please remember our holiday drive. Holiday season is not happy for everyone. We'd like to make it a little bit more so. Just wanted to say that, and we'll see everyone back again on January 6th. Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Me too. Motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah, we
A
should
motion to
probably-
adjourn from Councilmember Jackson.
Second.
It's been seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
So I have Councilmember Jackson motion made, Councilmember Shaw second.
And
Thank
happy
you.
holidays shared with everybody.
And happy holidays from all of us.